Hello, everybody. So this is going to just be a quick video on Greece, and the economic crisis that happened in the 2010s. Um, I did my college study abroad in Greece, so I lived there for 6 months. And what I learned while I was there has kind of been proven and borne out by the data and statistics that have emerged since the crisis. So I think it's a good example I wanted to make a video on because it's an example of propaganda that was being circulated both in the United States and Europe against the southern European countries. So, the standard narrative in the United States and elsewhere was that Greece had spent too much on social programs that it couldn't afford, and that the only way for them to recover would be through austerity measures, so severe government cuts to funding. And Germany was refusing to lend Greece more money unless it enacted these austerity measures. So, in exchange for essentially a bailout, Greece was forced to make severe cuts across the board to its government. And so basically, the narrative was bloated government leads to blah, blah, blah. So it was like an anti left narrative that arose out of the Greece story. And while I was there, I took an economics class and they covered the crisis. Like, the class was basically about the economic crisis. And we went to Rome for a conference and listened to all these economists talking about it. And they were right, it turns out, according to some articles I've been reading recently talking about how things kind of turned out. And really, the economic crisis in Greece and Portugal and Italy, those countries were in a state of rapid development when the 2008 financial crisis hit. And really, the problem was caused by fear in the financial system. If there hadn't have been a financial crisis, there wouldn't have been an economic crisis in Greece. If there hadn't been a financial crisis in the United States. And that's kind of basically, it wasn't the fact that the countries were actually at risk of defaulting on their debt. It was instead a freeze up that made countries, just a freeze up of availability and credit. Every country has to borrow more to pay its bills. That's how countries operate. So that fact on itself wasn't a cause. And if you look at their spending as a percentage of GDP, it was in line with other European countries. Very high compared to the United States, but that's the United States. European countries spend more on their governments. So, really, the countries didn't really do anything wrong. They were just leveraged heavily for growth when the financial crisis hit. And it wasn't that they had these massively bloated programs. It was a breakdown in the banking system. So basically, the European Central Bank should have been giving them bailouts without austerity conditions. And it's funny because now that Germany is facing the threat of dire economic straits due to their dependence on Russian gas, they are poised to have the bank bail them out without austerity measures because they know that it's from another cause. But when it came to Greece, it was all their fault. So basically the idea that it was all the Greeks' fault was BS. And yet that was the line that was towed by Germany and the United States. Now, for a little bit more back history too, the thing that really makes it even worse for me is that Germany is the one who lent all the money to Greece so that Germany could export things to Greece. So you remember Greece went on the euro, okay? Now most of Greece's problems, if Greece had been on the drachma the entire time and never gone on the euro, it would have never happened. So because Greece was on the euro, that makes it much harder for Greece to export because it's on a more valuable currency than the drachma would have been. So you switch to a more valuable currency through the European Union. What that does is it makes it easier to import and harder to export. It makes your trade deficit, it makes your trading balance go more towards a deficit the more powerful your currency is. And the euro is very strong because it's supported by the economies of Germany and all that. So the euro is stronger than the drachma would have been. The reason why that was beneficial for Germany is so that they could export things to Greece. If you go to Athens, like everyone drives Mercedes, like all the taxis are Mercedes. They have so many German imports. So to me, it's like Germany hobbled Greece's export economy. It's harder for Greece to export, olive oil and all that. To give Greece the purchasing power to buy German exports and bolster the German economy, and then blamed Greece for all the debt when Greece didn't even, they were operating as other EU governments do in terms of their balances. So basically what happens, guys, when a rich country goes on the same currency as a poor country, that rich country does have to support the poor country with financial liquidity. Especially, they need money. They need to be sort of supported and subsidized. If you look at the United States, for example, the rich states subsidize the poor states because the dollar, American potatoes or American corn, if it wasn't subsidized, is really expensive because American labor is really expensive because the dollar is really strong, and so on and so forth. So Mexico can sell avocados for cheaper. So the United States, a rich state like California that has Google and Apple, the real money makers, drives up the value of the dollar, and we do have to support the more rural agricultural states. And I don't complain about it because it's just how it works. It's not fair because if the rural agricultural states were their own country, they would be able to, because their currency would be much less valuable, they would be able to export and have good business. So, they just like how Greece and Portugal, when they go on the same currency as an advanced economy, it can really hurt them. So really, it was, in my opinion, it was mostly Germany's fault, and definitely like 99.9% the EU central bank's fault. And Deutsche Bank. So, the EU central bank was really mean to those countries for no good reason, really. They should have just kept lending and everything would have been fine. But they were panicking because of the financial crisis. Greece still hasn't defaulted. Like I said, I mean, despite the fact of Greece's economy, like their exports being affected by being on the euro and stuff, they were still doing sort of okay. So once the financial crisis was over, they were able to go back to normal, and they didn't have to implement the crazy austerity or anything like that. So, countries can afford expensive social programs, but it does affect employment levels and stuff. Like if you look at France, for example, their employment rate's low, their wages are lower, their taxes are higher. But countries can afford them if they tax properly. So, yeah, cool. Thanks.